I'd like to officially welcome you to our Listen, Learn, Explore discussion, Creating Joy at Work, with our very special guests, Jessica McCracken and Katie Wade. This is an informal conversation. We can talk about what was on the podcast. Jessica and Katie have some things up their sleeves that they're going to share with us and do with us. And what it looks like, we have some technical issues for S. Lewis, but good, you can hear us, so you can join in, and we'll trust that that you'll be able to enjoy the conversation here with us. So Katie and Jessica, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joan. So good to be with everyone today. Hopefully you tuned in to our podcast about creating joy at work, and that is what prompted you to be with us today. So you know that Jessica and I are from Creative Spark, creative engagement programming, supporting professionals in the field. And we are with Front Porch, a nonprofit senior living organization in California. So we're going to talk about creating joy today, right, Jessica? We're going to open up the floor for folks.
Yeah, we thought we'd like to hear from you all first, in either the chat, or let's make this a lively conversation. Curious if you're able to hear the podcast, what reflections or what stuck out to you. Also, in a similar light, what brought you to this discussion today for this further exploration around joy?
Yeah, might I punt it to Kathy? Kathy, do you have any thoughts? I know you listened to the podcast. Anything that stuck out to you?
Well, I loved it, and I believe that joy at work is so important, and creating it when you can is so important. And I have the honor of working for Pioneer Network with Joan and Penny, and we have a lot of joy in our work together. And Penny is really into that, as our leader, and leader being that way is really important too, and has a lot to do with the culture of an organization. So yeah. I thought it was great, and I was looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, and I think it's so important, as we look at what we do, we look at the domains of well-being, and joy is one of the domains of well-being. And that's certainly, sometimes we get stuck on some of the more concrete and black and white domains, and we don't make our way to joy. And what a great place really to start.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, Pioneer Network is so known for person-centered care, and really leading the charge on that culture shift. And I think it really connects to staff-centered work, that the staff are people too. And so I appreciate your comments around Pioneer Network as a whole, and as an organizational culture that really does embrace the people that make up the organization. And see them as authentic people.
I'm curious, Kathy, what it is that Joan and Penny do in the day-to-day that you think contribute, because you lit up when you said they create this joyful workspace. What is creating that?
Well, I think teamwork is really important, and we respect each other. We complement each other when it comes to compliment in terms of skills, and we complement each other both, in terms of, great job, and, really giving good, positive feedback. And even when the feedback is like constructive feedback, we all appreciate it, and, we don't take anything personally, and it's so, the people you work with, it's just so important to your enjoyment on your job.
I think that lends itself. I love that the feedback, feedback is so important, communication. And when you say, the people, it reminds me of trust, and, creating trust within the organization is really a foundation of finding purpose and meaning, and team cohesion, all of that. And so that's Definitely. A part of the work around joy.
Yes. And I think one of the things that Kathy said was how and from a skill perspective, we complement each other, and we really count on each other's strengths in terms of those skills. And, they know, everybody knows that when Twitter posts, somebody else better do it because I'm going to mess it up. And Kathy is the queen of grammar. So we know that when we are editing a document, we're going to get lots of edits from Kathy, and she's going to be the one that catches the apostrophe that's missing or the word that should have been capitalized that isn't. And I lovingly refer to Kathy as Sister Kathy, even though she is of the Jewish faith, because she reminds me of the nuns that I worked with when I was a child who were constantly fixing my grammar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bringing your strengths to work, letting your team members see that, leaning on it, knowing that we make a whole team, little pieces of ourselves, come together. That's great.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Beverly, Tina, Lisa, Steve, thoughts, reflections on the podcast or joy at work in general?
I'm sorry that I didn't listen to the podcast. So, but were you the ones who did a webinar a while ago on game playing? Was that you? Okay, no, somebody else then. That's all right. But what I'm thinking about right now, because this is the situation I'm in, is that I'm sort of saddened by something, and that is, so I'm not working. I'm retired, and my activity has been as a volunteer in senior homes, which had quite an adjustment during 2 years of COVID. But at any rate, so in the current place where I am volunteering, they went through a ownership change before COVID it was. And it was not a good situation. It was okay, but it was bought by a for-profit hospital. And then it sort of has declined. And then with COVID, obviously, I don't think they had many COVID deaths, but they definitely had people moving out, a combination, because the atmosphere of the service was not quite. And then people were alarmed about COVID, and families wanted to, whatever. So they went from a census of about 135, there's like 52 residents right now. So they've closed some floors. A lot of staff have either left or been, anyway, what I'm thinking of is in my volunteer work, what I do is, and this is not related to this topic, except that I try to make people, I go just to visit people mostly. We sing along, just some sing-alongs. But what I'm thinking of is that, so there's a place for a volunteer to bring joy, but I don't think the people who work there have much joy for a variety of reasons. And so I guess I don't have a question. I don't know. I'm just sort of pondering, I can, we each can do a little part in that, but in a place where, honestly, I don't know how long they can sustain themselves, just from a financial and census point of view. But anyway, okay, so that's a real downer.
It's reality.
Yeah.
That sometimes there's not a culture of joy, and you're the lone sparkler bearer, of joy when you come in. I think that is real, and we all have been in that situation. And it can be hard. I mean, one of the things that Jessica and I talk about is the need to fill up your own joy so that you can go out and share that, and ever more important in this culture that isn't, promoting that, right? So if you're walking in as the joy bearer that day, how are you getting filled up prior to going in and when you leave, right? So that you can share that. I think it's really pretty critical to think about, because you might not be getting it in that space. Yeah.
And also the joy work, which really involves a lot of things, but, self-compassion and self-care, connecting with yourself, really lends itself to a sense of resiliency, which is so important when navigating, difficult situations or change. You have yourself, as a compass. And so, the work that we explore in Creating Joy at Work in our emotional well-being series that we do through Creative Spark, our organization, really uses the creative process to kind of get conversations and ideas flowing with participants, and uses that creative process to help us tap in to something really authentic inside ourselves, and encourages the sharing, the connection that can come by sharing our process with each other.
What comes to mind
and
for
I think,
me? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that like, you know, again, I don't want to keep going back to the pandemic, but it just is definitely a factor. Yeah. And that the staff who work there, although I don't think they're necessarily unhappy people, they're just in an environment they're hitting a lot of walls, you know. So, and for me, I have joy when I walk into that place because I pretty much love old people. And so I like hanging out with them, and that's cool. But I guess, you know, I don't see this organization trying anything new, you know, or Kathy talking about the culture change, you know, what homes can do in order to embrace that or even begin to embrace it. So I guess my question is, and maybe you have a website that has this, of things that people like me, volunteers, or can do to, you know, I mean, I definitely can't go in there and just, you know what I mean, shake my hips around. Although I do that. I do that.
We encourage hip shaking.
Anyway, I'm not asking for, I guess that sounds like I'm asking for solutions. I'm really not. I think I'm just expressing my wish for more joy in places where there is no joy or little joy.
You know, I mean, two things come to mind because Jessica and I have pulled up a slide we're going to share around tips for creating more joy based on the research. And actually, Kathy hit 3 of them and Joan hit 1 already. I made a list as you all were talking, like, you're nailing it. But so there are tips, but also I'm thinking about back when I used to do a lot of home visits, I would really intentionally, and I would talk to volunteers and staff about this too, like before I walked into a home visit, I made sure I parked and had 5 minutes before every time to really ground myself, right? Center myself before I went into someone's home who is often experiencing isolation. And then I'm coming in as like, you know, a potential social connection that day, right? So I think a lot about the importance of centering into oneself before going into a potentially difficult situation. And for you, I think about what would it look like to park your car and take 5 minutes or 2 minutes even to fill up on joy? What's a joy shot, you know, that you might get before you go in so that it feels a little more tenable to be that joy bearer that day? And I think that's where also these tips might play in. Jessica, I have these pulled up if I can share them. And we can.
Yeah, and Beverly, I think you really tap into something I can relate to, as well as someone that joy comes quite naturally to me, and I love the work so much. My sense of purpose and meaning is strong in my work in the, you know, with older adults, but it's the organization. And, you know, Tina might, with her HR background, you know, may have some experience with this. It has to be worked into operations. This culture shift, this joy has to be a priority and modeled by the leadership, because it can't just be us on the front lines, like, you know, bringing joy, doing it all, you know, if we're not supported and it's not a priority of the organization. And so we work with like middle management and upper management a lot on this.
And for a situation in which you feel that you won't have any control over that, acknowledging that that's what we need to do in organizations, you know, thinking about finding a joy buddy, one other person, you know, that since you're going to go in, you briefly go in as a volunteer, right? Who's going to be that touch point for you, perhaps. And it really, interestingly, I mean, we have very supportive supervisor, but I think about the ways in which we've infused creative aging across our whole division now, just 1 or 2 of us starting that kind of movement across the division. And I think there's a lot to be said for what you can do as an individual as well. You know, it's kind of both, it's and, yes, and, right? It's coming at it from both angles. And yes, Tina, we do need a major culture shift, as we've seen, for sure. Let me get into presenting mode here of this slide. So we combed through a lot of the research, took classes to learn more about joy, and looked at our own teams and what we have a lot of joy at work. Where's that coming from? And compiled the categories that we found across all the literature and lived experiences. So you'll see humor, injecting humor into the workday, which Kathy, and Joan said, you call Kathy Sister Kathy, and explain that. And I wrote down humor, right? Having that touch point of that inside joke, right? Listen and reflect, pause, show gratitude. Kathy, you mentioned a culture of gratitude, you know, giving each other props for the work that you're doing and who you are, and celebrating the work, honoring the work that we're doing, taking the time to do that. So I'll just leave this on the screen so everyone can take a peek and see what it might be. Yeah, Beverly is enjoying the tips. Excellent.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of research out there that supports all this. And oftentimes when we're, you know, working with management, it's really important for them to know that this is based in research. We really lean on the Greater Good Science Center. They have a whole well-being tab that's really interesting to explore. But there's been a lot from like the Harvard Business Review, from Psychology Today. I mean, all you have to do is like Google, you know, burnout in the workplace, or, you know, happiness in the workplace, and you'll find a whole gamut of really evidence-informed research around, you know, why these buckets are important. I love the Celebrate one. I actually just finished a book I'd recommend. It's called The Lightmaker's Manifesto. I have gobbled this up. It's how to work for change without losing your joy. So it's really takes a look at people working in the realm of activism, however that manifests, and how to keep from burning out. And Celebrate like has a whole chunk. And I love that because I come from a programming background where culminating events are so important. And it goes back to how that Celebrate, that taking a moment to mark achievement and share time together and build community. Yes, I'll share the author. Build community is directly connected to people's levels of joy. This is Karen Walrond. I'll spell it out in the chat box. Really love this book.
Sounds great, Jessica. I'm definitely gonna get that book.
It is. Yeah. Beverly, you said these are awesome. What is standing out to you of the tips for creating joy? Anything particularly interesting in there?
Well, I think, yeah, no, I think I just, what I see, and you know, when I actually, the work that I did was in, it was an association for postgraduate dental education. So it was not in the realm of Pioneer Network, or however, you can imagine, I always got myself on the social committee because I also really, you know, sorry, so you can see me when I talk, and it's rude, but so all of these are the ways, you know, that create situations and acknowledge people. And, you know, okay, I could babble a lot, so I'm gonna say one more thing, and then, quite honestly, many of us who work, you know, we're not like curing cancer. I mean, we're doing important things, but there can be a lot of levity in workplaces. And I think that a lot of people who work and are really conscientious and committed to their job sort of miss that part. And exactly what you just said, there's documentation and evidence that it makes a difference. You know, joyful people are more productive. Joyful people are happier and in the work environment. So, so anyway, I just like, and you know, listen and reflect, obviously. And of course, that is something that that's so important with seniors. And I think, again, Kathy, I'm sorry, but I think you were quoting somebody who said, you know, what matters to an elder is what matters. And so it's that idea in the same situation, in a work situation, that with your staff, and particularly with the leadership and middle management, is that becomes a priority. You know, what matters to the staff is what matters. And you just, you know, one of the blanks is joy.
That's beautiful. I love that. I'm going to definitely take that. What matters to the staff is what matters. What matters to our participant is what matters. Oh, so good.
Yeah, because it does spill out. We know that if we're, not taking care of our staff and, feeding their sense of joy, purpose, and meaning, that it's going to directly, affect the way in which our community members, our participants, the environment that they're existing in.
And retention of staff, really high turnover in places that aren't focused on the culture for staff. Yeah.
I think it is a mind shift, because so much of our staff, as I said, I started out as an activity professional, a music therapist, but then I became a nurse. Well, as that nurse, I was absolutely that task orientation and that side of the very objective side of the work is very much stressed in your training and everything else. So my poor brain is kind of a little mishmash of both. And I think one of the things that is so neat, and looking at just Creative Spark, the name of your organization, and we touched on this on the podcast, was, we're seeing a focus on work like the work that Ann Bastings is doing with creativity, the work that an organization called Reimagining Dementia, which is made up, the primary people that are a part of that organization are certainly people living with dementia, but people with most of them have some kind of a link to the creative arts, music or theater or writing poetry or being artists. And I think it's very gratifying to see that creative side is starting to really show itself in our area, in our I hate to call it a profession. I don't want to call it an industry, but within aging services, we're starting to recognize how critical that is, that we bring that out in each other, that we use creativity as a tool. And that's what you're doing so much. I see in the work that Katie, you and Jessica are doing. And it's just as important as those other things that we bring to the table.
100%. One could argue it's the underpinning of all the other things, right, that make everything else successful. I love that. I want to underscore something Tina put in chat. I want to say out loud. She says, I'm always hopeful when I see how simple these acts can be. Joy can be contagious and need to build them into our daily habits. That's one of the things I was going to talk about, Tina, is like, these are pretty easy when, and this is a research-based tips, and none of them are like huge lifts, right? They're small daily lifts, right? So really it's more about consistency over time than it is some big project to get off the ground. So I love that reflection of how simple they are.
Yeah, it's about intention. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and if you're someone who loves cat videos, hit me up. I'll put my email in the chat later and you can send me your favorite cat videos. We can jam out.
Oh,
it really
cool,
is simple.
Thanks for the plug on the conference. So Reimagine is going to be at the conference in July with Pioneer Network, and I wanted to plug Creative Aging San Francisco, which has monthly gatherings. It's something I founded many years ago, and Katie and I run together through Creative Spark. So we meet monthly around different topics. This month was awesome. It was on climate change, and we had Dr. Mick Meyer out of Growing Greener. Have you met him? Oh my goodness. Awesome. Anyways, in June, it's all Reimagine Dementia, and members will be presenting and chatting, and it's a really cool group to get involved with. So I put that link in there. You're all welcome to join. People join from all over the country.
Thank you. Let's maybe also visit Tina's last part of her comment around that joy is contagious, which is a really astute point, Tina. I'm glad, especially from the HR perspective, that you're thinking about that. Because the research, I mean, goodness, if there's one extreme theme in the research, it is about sharing your joy, right? It is about not only filling yourself up, but being able to reflect that out to others, and how much that promotes joy in everyone around you, biologically ripples out to the people in your space. So it is so important to think about sharing that joy. It's interesting because it's a little bit of a mind shift for me. It has been. Maybe Jessica, she was born sharing joy, I think. for me, I had to think about like, oh, I'm taking this picture of something beautiful that really just sparked me, you know, inside for a moment, like, and then I have to now, who am I going to share that with, right? Let me share that out with someone. And sending those simple reminders about joy out to folks. Like Jessica will send me pictures of her nephew, right, that day. And, you know, it brings me joy to see her joy about her nephew, right? So it's that easy, right? A simple text or message to share out the joy.
Yeah, it's very different than just posting it to social media. Like I wouldn't do that with photos of my nephew anyways, but you know, being really intentional about connecting with someone around your joys, and that contagiousness is inside of you as well. So once you start identifying joys in your life and you're really mindful about that, they start magnifying. All of a sudden, joy is everywhere. We have an exercise. Katie, should we share our work? Okay, so our trainings are interactive in nature. We always ask people to bring markers or pens and paper with them to any training that we do. And so this is just one exercise from our Creating Joy at Work training that is available to be brought to your team. So grab a piece of paper, candy, a scrap. But I think it's important, you know, to, you know, if you have something that you can, you know, reflect on later, it's nice, you know, give yourself this time and space to think about your joys. So how we begin is with a rather large circle in the center of the page. I'm talking like giant chocolate chip cookie size, you know. Yes. Wow, Katie, that is big. I love it. Get it.
Big today.
Through that circle, you're going to draw two intersecting lines, like a big plus sign, and have the edges of the plus sign go through and out of your circle. You know, it creates kind of an outside border, very reminiscent of you know, the Celtic cross or the medicine wheel kind of shape.
We have different reference points because I see like a rifle scope from my Southern background.
Yeah, you know, your POV is definitely shaped.
Yeah.
My last name's McCracken for a reason. At the top of it's not just my rapper name. I always tell people I'm MC Kraken. Kids love it because Kraken's what's happening. At any rate, back to the wheel of joy. So at the top of your page or somewhere around it, maybe on a scrap piece of paper, if you're Katie, whose circle takes up the entire page, you want to write 4 things at work. Let's focus on work, you know, because that's what our context is today. But you can do this in life, general life. 4 things that bring you joy. Just 4 things that bring you joy. 1, 2, 3, 4.
This could be a place, an experience, a person, an activity. Let's think expansively.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Great. And as you're wrapping up with those 4 things that bring you joy, you'll notice that your chocolate chip cookie has turned into a pizza with 4 slices or a pie because of those intersecting lines. And in each of those slices, take a look at your joy and let's peel it apart, unpack it, as they say. What is it about that brings you joy? What is the essence of that joy at work? For instance, the Creative Aging San Francisco gatherings are a joy point for me. I love these monthly meetings. If I unpack it, what is it about it that brings me joy? In a word or phrase, I would say connection. And so I'd write connection in that pie slice. I'll give you a moment to work on that.
If you have multiple colors at your fingertips, this is a good time to utilize each slice with a different color.
Ooh.
Mm.
I love this exercise. It's such, you could use this onboarding with, residents or staff. Imagine as a employer, and you lead with joy from day one, first day at work, what brings you joy? And then you can, once you identify that, you can bring out people's strengths, associate projects with what brings them joy, and you'll get so much more productivity, and commitment out of that because they're invested. So as you're finishing that up, grab, if you have additional colors, this is another good time to grab it. On the outside, you'll notice that the extending lines create a border. So this is an opportunity to work a different side of your brain. What we're going to do is doodle or fill in this border for each of your essence with shapes or scribbles that kind of capture the feeling of what that essence is. And again, this is going to work a different side of your brain and really kind of embed the joy into that. Plus it's fun and it makes for a cool design. So just around the border, fill in what that essence would look like if you're capturing it with lines and shapes.
As Jessica and I were developing Wheel of Joy as a tool, and we started out thinking about the 4 joys and then got to the point of, thinking about the essence of those joys. That really was a tip we've gained from working with older adults. Like, life is going to throw you so many things that require adaptations all along the lifespan. And of course, physical adaptations as we get older. And so thinking about, man, if I don't have access to my thing that gives me joy, I can no longer hike, for example, or whatever it is. What's the stripping it down to the essence is going to, the people we have seen in older age, they're most malleable and adaptable to life are the ones that can tap into what the essence of that joy is and go find it somewhere else, right? So if I strip down that, one thing I love about colorful fingernail polish, that's one of mine this week, wearing bright colored fingernail polish, it's unexpected, right? This bright pop of color. And so thinking about, if that's what brings me joy is that sort of unexpected or sort of the variety of that, where else do I find that in life, right? When maybe I can no longer get my nails painted, or, I can't afford it that week, whatever it is. And that to me is like, man, what a takeaway, a gift from working with older adults to think about the essence of our joy and where to find that. It just explodes the possibilities.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, go ahead, Joan.
I was going to say, don't you think one of the things that we often do when we're training and helping people understand the culture that we're trying to build is when we're talking the difference between facility and home. And that's just what you're talking about, Katie, that essence of we take home and we ask people to, when you say that it's home that brings you joy or home that you're longing for, what is it really that you're longing for? What is the essence, I guess, as you put it, of home? So it's the relationships, it's the love, it's the comfort, and kind of unwrapping that to find out what really is the joy of home that is why you long for it.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful.
In my work, I ran an adult day health center for many years. And so I heard I want to go home so much. And that's not really what, they're requesting something else. It's the feeling of home. And so when you can start figuring that out, so it's a great exercise because you're right, you can peel that apart in so many ways. Thank you for sharing that.
And I wonder if that's also at the, I think about in this day and age, workforce is such a huge issue. And I wonder sometimes if that's not the same thing in some of the some of the things we see that our employees are wanting, and they say that they need, or things that frustrate them, getting to the essence of why is that sucking the joy out of you? And maybe, I don't know if this happens in the work, but sometimes you have to kind of come about it from the other direction. You have that thing you have the things that bring joy, you have the things that suck joy out of your life. And sometimes I have to get to the essence of what it is that is causing it to suck the joy out of my life, so I can replace it with the thing that brings joy to my life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gosh, as a therapist, that speaks to me hugely, because I think if we don't get to the essence of what is sucking the joy, then it's really hard to change it if you don't know. So I think in our full Creating Joy at Work workshop, Jessica and I start out with a burnout quiz that really has some interesting tidbits of how burnout shows up in us at work that maybe we don't think about as burnout. One of mine being irritability for, like at an email for, that wouldn't normally irritate me, for example. But it gives you little ways of looking at, how that burnout is showing up. And it's a good place to start of like assessment of like what's going on.
Well, I'd love to hear from folks about their joys. Oh, cool, Katie. Yeah, that really came together.
Yeah.
I really got into now I'm doing stuff in the center.
The middle. Oh, I love the hand, the people.
I hadn't done that before. Yeah, the people holding hands, that was connections.
Great. Yeah, let's hear from folks, especially if you want to tell us like one of your joys and then what the essence is. I'd be very curious to hear someone kind of strip that back to an essence.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it in chat too, for anyone that doesn't have a mic. And Tina, I'm curious, I believe you had the HR perspective. Jessica's idea of what about someone's first day at work, they're filling out all their HR paperwork and you do the wheel of joy with them, right? How cool would that be as an HR rep? To learn what people's strengths are, what they're bringing. Yeah, wouldn't that be refreshing? Yeah, in the midst of all those papers you have to sign with a new employee. Any thoughts on the wheel of joy? Anything at all? We can open
up. One of the things I put on the wheel of joy that in my work life, that one of my favorite parts about the work that I do is the ability to make connections with people. Mm-hmm. When someone reaches out and they're just looking for someone, or someone who has an idea for them, or needs what it is that Katie, you and Jessica have to share, and we're able to make a connection with mm-hmm. someone and know that they can take that and now move forward. And now their growth is their responsibility, but they have a tool now to continue to grow, and you can step out of the way. It's kind mm-hmm. of like your child being of age, and now they can start to be their own person.
I had that one too, and but for me it was two things. One is what Joan just said about it, and then the other is the connections that I've made through my work. Mm-hmm. Not only the connections and being a connector, for other people, but also the connections that I've made that have enriched my life and my work.
Mm-hmm. That's such an interesting two-part perspective of the sort of purpose of being a connector for other people, that sort of embedded purpose and joy. And then also, of course, yeah, connecting as an individual. That's great.
Oh, we've got some good ones in chat. So Tina added in a joy being of service to others. Breaking that down, helping people be their best selves. My imaging was stars and the moon shining and the sun shining. We are different and all have something to contribute to the greater good. I love that. Yes. Yeah, shine bright. Shine bright.
Yeah. Makes me want Tina to be my HR rep. I mean, I love my HR rep, but come on over, Tina. Bring your joy. I love this. And then Beverly wrote, I'm in a grad program, gerontology senior advocate, learning about elders and me. I doodled a timeline. Oh, interesting. A, started program. B, now. C, excited what will be next with the education. Oh, love the timeline twist. Thank you, Beverly.
That's great.
Very cool to think about the future of our joys. Tina, okay, good point, Tina. She says, I actually don't fit into HR, even though she has the schooling and designation. Keep trying, yeah. Anyone else?
Tina, I would say don't keep trying to fit in. Be yourself. This is wonderful. I think there's a lot of communities who could really benefit from someone from HR who doesn't fit in like you do.
Yes, a new kind of HR person.
Yeah, although it'll be like what Beverly said of, you know, sometimes, I mean, not to characterize all HR folks, but sometimes when you're in an environment, of course, that isn't celebrating joy, and it is hard to be that sort of that lone torchbearer, right? And I think for me, Jessica co-founded Creative Aging San Francisco that she mentioned. That collective for me really filled a gap to meet with other creative thinkers in the field of aging services, and really helped me feel full up, even when I sometimes felt like I was sort of the lone creative voice in, you know, conversations at work sometimes. So really finding your people, right? It doesn't have to be your coworkers sometimes if that's not available.
Yeah.
I have a question, Katie and Jessica, that, you know, comes from an experience that I have had recently with, you know, someone that I've been working with. And one of the challenges that she finds is that she is a very joyful person, and she's trying very hard to bring into the leadership of the organization that joy and that fun and the relationships. But some of the people that work with her and that are families and surrogate families are very black and white thinkers, and their expectation is that very black and white approach to what the manager should be like in terms of their relationship with staff, you know, that you should have cut and dry expectations for things. How do you help that person? What kind of advice can you give them to break through as need be, or to just have the resilience to keep going as they face the naysayers that question why they're possibly so happy and wanting to do things out of the box kind of way?
Oh goodness, it's taken me back to an early experience in my career. It really is. I mean, I think some of it depends on your position, right? Because if you have a position of any authority, then you can actually enact some change operationally, which is amazing when that's possible. And thinking about embedding some of the joy making into operations. So if you're someone who facilitates meetings, for example, starting your meeting with sharing a gratitude, you know, everyone in the room sharing a gratitude, or asking people ahead of time to bring their favorite meme or a picture from their weekend that was joyful, like, you know, having people think about it ahead of time or prepare something will magnify joy. Just that simple, like meeting, like starting a huddle or a meeting in that way and consistently doing that, actually, the research says has some pretty significant ripple effects. The Greater Good Science Center has this awesome nurses kit for gratitude. And during COVID, they worked with nurses, you know, and talked about how to implement gratitude in their operational work. And it is so cool to see the impact that something as small as sharing gratitude in a huddle can have in a workplace, you know, and change the entire floor, you know, the experience of that shift. Jessica, what comes to mind for you?
I love seeing Tina's note in the chat. You are my people. Thank you, Tina. You know, confidence and being, you know, really grounded in yourself. We even now, you know, are always getting questioned and kind of almost interrogated and having to justify our trainings that people are asking us to bring to them. So why is joy important? This is not going to be too touchy-feely, is it? It's not going to be too artsy-fartsy, is it? You know, it's rough, you know, but I have a lot of confidence in myself, and I have a lot of passion for the work. I've had to justify, you know, working in creative aging for 15 years, you know, why the creative process is important to embed into a holistic care of the older adults in our lives. And so I don't know, I guess I have a pretty strong muscle for, being able to stay confident in that. But yes, being your best ally, and knowing that there are like-minded people out there to connect with. We have kind of a cool thing that we could throw out. Kathy put something in the chat I thought was beautiful. That's what people say when they come to our conferences. I found my people. And this is this call to action that you have, that you can take on with us is twofold, continue this kind of connection with each other. First, we have our Creating Joy at Work workshop that you can, bring to your teams, and we'll put that link in the chat. And then we also have this really cool project that we do in partnership with our kind of laboratory, Ruth's Table here in San Francisco, an amazing creative aging nonprofit. It's a gallery and a workspace, and it has a really fantastic virtual exhibition component. So I'll be dropping that link into the chat as well. So what we do every year is we have these parallel explorations around a similar theme. We're all working on the same theme. We have curriculum that you can use. Last year it was around image of self, because exploring identity and connecting that to your own resiliency we found to be really needed. This year it's around feel this way. So really tapping into our emotions, naming our emotions, sharing our emotions as a way to kind of navigate this world. So everybody can be involved and feel this way. We have a virtual exhibition that'll happen late in the summer with submitted artwork. So you can submit artwork, poetry, photography, drawings, collage that relate to the theme of feel this way. And it'll come together on site for those that are submitted through the mail, and also virtually for those that are submitted via image. And we also have monthly meetings, check-ins with people who are facilitating Feel This Way and exploring Feel This Way. It's a great way to meet with community, get creative, share how you're feeling, and be involved.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to join that, and I'll put in the chat our emails too, but thinking about, there's some no cost ways. We have curriculum and worksheets already made that we can send you, and if you're someone who can activate those in your team, your staff, or in residents, participants, volunteers, you can create pieces together through that curriculum. We also have trainings that we do to train staff around delivering creative engagement programs. And then we also have direct service with teaching artists that will teach directly art making classes around the theme Feel This Way. So more to come, hopefully, with you all.
Joan, thank you. These are great resources, and we'll make sure that they all end up on the events page with the recording. So that if you didn't get them out of the chat right away, or if you're sharing this with somebody else later on, that they'll still have the access to those wonderful resources and the ability to touch base with Katie and Jessica as well, because it's those personal connections that bring us joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we love it. So please reach out. Absolutely.
And they put their email addresses in the chat, so it's easy to reach out.
I think the challenge, and I'm sure Katie, you and Jessica face this, is just the willingness of organizations to make this a priority. Mm-hmm. I've got to teach. I've got all the mandatory trainings I have. I've got, I just had a survey, and I've got 4 new in-services I have to do to meet my plan of correction, all those different things. Where do I fit the time? How do you convince them, or are you able to convince them that this is important? This needs to be part of your training, or part of who you are as a learning organization, is learning how to be joyful.
Yeah, I mean, we totally agree with that. And I think in some ways people have to be ready to hear this message, and like any message of culture change, right? And I think that COVID has accelerated that in many ways, where people are like, uh-oh, something's not working. You know, our culture is broken. There's so much burnout. What do we do? Even in our own organization, we've seen that a much more widespread adoption of well-being tools and trainings from us than in the past. So I think that's really useful, and also not acknowledging like these aren't just good ideas that we have, right? This is really grounded in evidence-based research about the physical effects of joy and how it manifests itself in retention and productivity at the workplace. It's really quickly, I think, taking prominence. Like Jessica said, if you just Google it, you're going to see the highest level of sort of HR organizations talking about this topic, you know, and how to bring this to the workplace.
Yeah, I think with the, you know, you got to deal with like front of mind. You know, I was bringing that up with Katie yesterday. Like, what are people's like front of mind things they need to deal with? And, you know, I see it a lot, you know, people, administrators in particularly, like in panic mode. Literally, I mean, your body is responding to stress physically, panic mode. And so how do you like say, well, you need to, you know, have gratitude and, you know, drink a cup of tea, but you have to get out of panic mode, because you're not going to make good judgments. You're going to drive your staff away. But so deal with the front of mind stuff in regards to connecting it to numbers. It's really goes back to retention and attraction of like, you know, recruitment of staff. And we're seeing, you know, an epidemic of people leaving the field at a time where we need more people coming to the field. You know, we need the opposite to be happening big time. And why would anybody want to come into our field if it doesn't bring them joy? I mean, honestly, that's why I got into the work, was the purpose and meaning behind it. It wasn't the paycheck. I'm in San Francisco. I have options for paychecks. So we have to, like, I mean, it's just imperative, and it's doable. Back to Tina's point of, you know, these are doable steps. If we just, you know, if we keep intention around it, it's doable.
I think that COVID, sorry, who was that? Tina? I think that COVID has made people rethink their priorities when it comes to work-life balance and work, you know, and feeling that they do want to find joy in work, you know, even before they did too, maybe, but they were just going along. And then COVID happened and you realize, oh, I survived it, you know, and so many people didn't. And how do I make my life one really worth living and make use or whatever of and appreciate every part of it and every minute of it. And if you're in a job where you're miserable, that really affects your life, because if you have the job and you're in it, it's such a big part of your life when you're a working person.
Yeah, when I hear you speak, it makes me think of the whole person, right? Which I know is very central to Pioneer Networks. I mean, thinking about, I think that came to forefront during COVID. We are whole people at work and at home. You know, we don't get to separate these parts of ourselves as much as we might think we can. And so really is incumbent upon leaders and all of us to be thinking about the whole person showing up at work and how we take care of the whole person. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and when you talk about taking care of the whole person and the living, I think it always makes me think too then of the resident. And, you know, one of the things that we are hearing so much more is, you know, beyond resident directed, which always was our goal, is citizenship as a model where everyone in the organization has a responsibility and a role, whether you are a resident, whether you're a staff member or a family member. And how are we engaging our residents to help support and encourage this, the need for joy, to help, because they can have a strong influence on the employees in terms of if the residents believe how important and understand how important joy is for the staff, and I think they do, I think most of them do, are they sharing that? Are they showing that? Or, you know, and because there's nothing that feels better, I think, for most employees than having a resident recognize them for something, and or having that special moment where you sit down and you share the photos that you brought in, the new baby that you just had, or you just came back, you got married, or something happened. And so I think having the residents a part of this whole thing with us can make it an even more joyful journey.
Joan, swoon. I swoon. I have to fan myself. Yes.
Part 2. We need to go. 100%. Part 2.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Thank you for having us, Joan. This is such a nice time together.
Yeah, my goodness. And we're almost at the top of the hour. So, oh my gosh, this has been fun to talk about joy for a whole hour. I think every one of us should commit to, if not an hour a day, at least 5 minutes to talk with somebody about joy every day. And I love your ideas and I love your resources, and we will share those with everyone.
Great.
Any last thoughts, comments, words of inspiration?
Thank you all for sharing your joy. Truly, I feel filled up now. So I appreciate it. And I hope maybe just today we can all commit to intentionally sharing joy with someone else, you know, a photo, a text, whatever it is, pick someone.
Sounds like a plan.
Great idea.
Katie and Jessica, thank you so very much. We thank those who were able to join us. Please share this podcast and this recording will be on Pioneer Network's website. So please feel free to let your friends know that they can glean a little bit of joy by listening to the podcast or watching this program, or just share some joy with them in another way. And we thank you, and hopefully we'll see some of you in Denver.
Yay. All right, take good care.